that sounds like it's under duress. It sounds like a shotgun prenup.
Yeah.
She was talking about how it casts shadows for you in that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
That's pretty stupid.
yeah.
Story. Wow.
400 million in
Yeah.
one account.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like imagine opening your bank account. I got 400 million on my app.
Just there's not enough space for the zeros in that.
I gotta
Wow.
turn my phone sideways so I can
It's
see
a
all the
portrait.
zeros.
That's exactly right. I mean, you can do whatever you want with the estate tax, but they're not going to repeal death anytime soon
Yeah.
up in Washington, right? So
I'm sure they'll try.
they may try, but so everybody.
Senators might get it.
Yeah, maybe if that would be first to roll out.
All of which is owned by AI.
Yeah.
Thanks, James. You always cut right to the chase. In fact, I think we're all living in a virtual simulation anyway,
That's
so
right.
it's
That's
all
right.
AI.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Think Fresh, Move Forward podcast. Today, we have a special guest with us, Scott Golightly. We're talking about some absolutely terrifying stuff to me. That's estate planning, trusts, things that are planning for the future in a financial way, which is absolutely terrifying to me. And basically how to protect yourself.
And your family and your
your
business,
family
right?
and your business and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
Protect your assets.
so how to protect your assets. So help me understand. Can you give me in dummy terms what estate planning and trusts are?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, guys, for the opportunity. So estate planning, right? What we're trying to do with estate planning, and it's a little tagline that I use, we're trying to plan. How do I like to say it? I said we're trying to plan for an uncertain future, right? Peace of mind planning for an uncertain future. Everybody's going to pass away. I mean, you can do whatever you want with the estate tax, but they're not going to repeal death anytime soon up in Washington, right? So
I'm sure they'll try.
they may try, but so everybody.
Senators might get it.
Yeah, maybe if that would be first to roll out for sure. But the point is, everybody's going to pass away eventually, and what we're trying to do with estate planning is we're answering those questions about, okay, I've passed away. Who's going to step up and handle what I've left behind? Who's going to administer my estate? That is, whatever I've left behind. Who's going to deal with the debts and the fallout of that? And then if there's anything left, you're going to provide for your beneficiaries, usually family members, a spouse maybe first, children second.
What happens when nothing is specified?
Yeah, so
What happens? Yeah, somebody dies unexpectedly. There's nothing in writing anywhere.
Yeah, so I like to tell people, when I meet people for the first time, I look at them and I say, believe it or not, everybody in this room has an estate plan. It's either by design or by default. That is, if you don't have one in place, the government, usually it's like every state law. Virginia has a code, and the Code of Virginia provides default rules that say, if you didn't do the plan, here's what we think you would have wanted to do, and these are the laws that are going to govern what happens with no planning.
And we know that business owners traditionally trust the government in every way, shape, and form. So,
That's
so
a
it
good
makes
policy.
sense.
Absolutely.
They know what they're
not.
doing. That's why they're elected.
Yes.
We elected them because they know what they're doing.
Because we want the experience of the DMV all week long with
Yeah.
everything that we do.
Yeah, I have a fabulous time at the DMV.
Yep. So that's right. Do you want the government to do your estate plan for you, or do you want to take the time to do it? And that's kind of what we're doing as estate planners, is we're customizing, I like to say memorializing a client's wishes, right? Getting them in writing. This is what I want to go down when I pass away or become incapacitated, and we make sure they're legally executed. A lot of the docs need notarization and witnesses and stuff, so there's some details that are associated with it, but that's really estate planning, what's going to happen to me and my stuff when I'm gone.
What do you think? Tell me a little about your background, right? And what made you choose? There's a lot of different directions you can go with law, right?
Yep.
I mean, everything from like family law, right, to business law,
To
to
criminal.
estate planning, to criminal. What made you land on kind of this branch of law?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. With a name like Golightly, I thought I'd be a judge. I mean, you can imagine Judge Golightly. I just thought that'd be really cool. I actually think I put that in my law school admissions essay. I was like, I want to ascend to the bench and be Judge Golightly. Well, it didn't work out that way. I really found the law classes in property law and estate planning to be quite interesting. At least I've always thought one of my strengths, just generally speaking, is to take a complex subject and kind of put it in bite-sized chunks for people to understand and execute on. And
So you're very analytical as a person then.
very analytical as a person. I like to be able to take a complex code of laws and say, here's what this means to you in your life. And I'm able to get clients to get that aha moment. Oh, I understand. And just that feedback over time, frankly, has made me feel really good about myself. So the more I feel good about myself, the more I want to do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So taking a complex set of laws and making them make sense to folks who need assistance in achieving some peace of mind, that really drew me to estate planning. And that's where we built our practice, is meeting with people and giving them that peace
And
of
from-
mind. And I think you came up with, when we did our branding package with Fresh Move, there are no stupid questions. I mean, I'm approachable. I like to make things understandable. That's what we worked on together, and that's kind of the way I see it.
So a lot of information filtering.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah,
Okay.
Aaron, that's fair.
So, one question when it comes to estate planning, or I would say more trust. I want to start in the whole real estate aspect, because that's like the most well-known asset that people own, or most
sure.
common. I mean, yeah, there's the car, and then people have businesses and all that stuff and bank accounts. But if I own a home, and again, I don't own it outright, the bank still owns, X number of dollars, can I put that home into a trust? And if I do that, and I can, what's the benefits of doing that?
Yeah, that's a really kind of loaded question, a bit to unpack there. The short answer is absolutely 100% yes. You can put that house, even if it's got a mortgage or a deed of trust on it, into a trust. I think the bigger question is, what type of trust are you looking at, and why are you looking to do it, right? And so without getting too much in the weeds, I just want to talk about the two primary categories of trust, very high level, right? There's a so-called revocable trust, which is one that the person who built can change, revoke, amend, do whatever the heck they want with it. And then there's a so-called irrevocable trust, one that they're not supposed to change, one they don't have really any control over it, right? And I try to explain it this way, Ryan. A revocable trust is nothing more than a last will and testament substitute to avoid probate. I know I covered a lot of kind of things we haven't touched on yet, but the only time you're doing a revocable trust is you're saying that when I die, I don't want my family to have to go through the court-supervised probate process and have my family pay a probate tax to the county.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
Want to make it simpler and streamlined for that.
Simple, streamlined. It's a private family document. It's not recorded at the courthouse like a will is. A revocable trust is nothing more than a will substitute to avoid probate, period. Okay? The irrevocable trust comes in all kinds of flavors. Why would I do something that I can't change? Why would I do an irrevocable trust? Well, I'm trying to create separation between myself as the former asset owner and the trust as the new asset owner. And the reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to maybe set up an asset protection strategy. I don't want the creditors to get to this house. I don't want my ex-spouse to get to this house. I don't want the government to tax me at death because I own assets in excess of the estate tax limitation. Those kinds of things, right? So, like I said, it's kind of a loaded question you asked me. Yes, you can put a house in trust, but I think the bigger question is, why am I going to do it, and what type of trust would serve my needs?
So if I did a revocable trust on my home, does it make sense to do it now or do this at a later time? Like, let's say I do have some instance of getting married sometime soon. Does it make sense for me to do that now before I even met this person? We'll get into prenups and all that stuff. Some people say prenups don't work, but then I've seen where prenups do work. So I want to hit on that conversation. But from an asset protection, does my one home that I live in, does it make sense to put that into a trust?
I would say absolutely makes sense to put the home in a revocable trust to avoid probate.
At first.
Yes, at first. I don't see right now a need for Ryan Leach to put his home into an irrevocable trust that you can't change, because we're kind of putting the cart before the horse there. It doesn't do you a whole lot of good to give away a house at this point in time that you have no control over when you have no kind of impending reason why you would want to do that. So an asset protection trust would be something that you would do down the road.
Okay.
And as far as I do pick up a theme about the prenup concern and the marriage issues.
I'm just curious.
I do encourage folks to consider a prenuptial agreement, especially when those folks are bringing, a business or certain level of assets to the marriage. You should go ahead and consider to do a prenup, which will allow you to do whatever estate planning you want independent of your new spouse.
So I have a follow-up question to that. But back to the one house. Now, let's say if I owned multiple houses. Let's say I had 5 rental properties. Should I put those 5 rental properties into one trust or into 5 individual trusts that are then owned by or under another trust?
Yeah.
All of which is owned by AI.
Yeah.
Thanks, James. You always cut right to the chase. In fact, I think we're all living in a virtual simulation anyway,
That's
so
right.
it's
That's
all
right.
AI.
That's right.
But I'm kind of serious about that, but not really. So
I want to come back to that one.
Yeah, I do. Neil deGrasse Tyson has an interesting YouTube video.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
It's interesting. So, all right, let me back up. So Ryan's question is, if I have multiple rental properties, do I put them in multiple trust or one parent
Or
trust or
3 rental properties, a business here, a dry cleaning service here, protecting assets that way.
Yeah. So I would start, Ryan, with the proposition that when we're talking about rental properties or service lines of businesses and things like that, I actually prefer the limited liability company as a holding vehicle for those assets first.
Okay.
Okay. And the LLC in Virginia, and I think most states, it's simply a disregarded entity for tax purposes if it's a sole member. So if it's the Ryan Leach Rentals LLC, you own that LLC. You're the sole owner. It's a disregarded entity for tax purposes, so it's not an independent taxpayer. Any profits and loss will just flow through to your personal tax return. So it's easy peasy, right, from a tax perspective. And then you just dump your properties into the limited liability company. And once you have those properties in the LLC, you've got liability protection, right?
Right.
The issue we run into there is if you have 5 rental properties and you put them all in one LLC, something goes awry on one of those properties, it can infect the whole lot, right? So we always advise clients about that kind of, it's really what's the word I'm looking for? A trade-off. You can do one simple LLC and put all 5 properties in one and have them exposed to each other. You could do 5 separate LLCs and put each property in its own separate LLC and they'll stand alone, which is ideal from an asset protection
Just got to do
standpoint.
5 tax returns. Yeah.
Well, if it's a
Jeez.
disregarded entity, you'd avoid the tax returns, but you still have to file the State Corporation Commission $100 filing fee for every LLC, the $50 annual registration.
Which you can't make it do auto pay, which is so stupid.
That's true. They won't let you do it. Now, here's something I just spoke on, and I know this isn't a tangent, it's a direct answer to your question, but it's something I'm going to put on the table. Virginia law and some other states have adopted what's called the Series LLC Act and a Virginia Business Trust Act. What those are doing is they're trying to address the very problem you just said. What do I do? Do I do 5 LLCs? Do I do 1 LLC? What the Series LLC lets you do is you file one Series LLC with the State Corporation Commission. You file one $100 payment and one $50 annual registration fee. But you can have literally unlimited series of LLCs within that one.
Wow, the
Oh,
government doing
interesting.
something that seems streamlined? I am shocked.
Exactly. You can do that. And so the neat thing about that is it cuts way down on your administrative and upfront costs because, again, it's only one filing with a State Corporation Commission with an unlimited amount of series.
Someone must have lobbied for that because I feel like that's counterintuitive for the government because that's less fees they would make.
But you know where they're going to get you? They're going to get you in what's called the Corporate Transparency Act, or the CTA, which has just come online, which is going to basically impact all small companies and business owners. Now Fresh Move Media is going to have to go in and register when the site comes online who the owners are. So now you guys are going to have to to disclose to the State Corporation Commission who you are as people and your addresses.
Why?
And so the question
Versus like a registered agent only.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Before, it's always
okay.
been just a registered agent, and I
Yep.
think the CTA is trying to address the concern or the perceived concern that there's a lot of nefarious things going on with these small businesses and LLCs, and money's being moved and things like that. So
We've made our attorney, our business attorney, our registered agent.
Yeah.
See-
So, and
He recommended that we do
and
that.
not to go on a rant here, but I found it a little bit frustrating that even just this past week,
Oh yeah.
we needed for Google verification for a specific account that we have, we had to showcase our with the seal of Virginia, right?
Mhm.
Our corporate LLC, certificate,
We are who we say
right?
we are.
your articles of organization
There
usually.
it is, right? And it needed to have the address on it,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Our principal office,
Place of business,
right?
yep.
It's not
So-
on the document.
So I go online to the filing, right, and I go to request, a document on this, right, and there is something called a statement of fact, I think, right,
That sounds right.
and so I pay $6, right, through their online portal, download it, and it's a statement of fact that we exist, right, but it literally does not have our address on it. It just says
Yeah, he sends it
this
to me. I'm like,
entity
this
exists,
is useless.
Right? So then I call them, and I'm on hold, right, whatever, finally get to someone, and he says, oh, so you need a statement of fact with an address on it. I said, yes, exactly. And he goes, okay, you will need to mail a letter to us stating this is exactly what you need. And I said, can't you just tell someone there? Right? Like, can you turn to someone and say, hey, this business needs this, right? And he said, no. it needs to be a letter that you write, handwritten or typed, right? That's mailed to us, right? And then I said, well, can I email you, right? And he said, no, it's got to be a mailed letter. You could deliver it if you want. And so I went down there and I delivered it, right? To this.
So are they going to mail this to us?
Yeah, they have to mail it. Yeah, so we're waiting another. I sent that over to them last Thursday, so we're gonna wait 3 to 5 business days or whatever. So hopefully.
Well, I hope you put a self-addressed stamped envelope in there. There may be another 3 weeks.
This is ridiculous.
Be careful with that.
And I got there a few minutes before they closing time, but they'd already closed, and the person up front was like. Oh, the security guard was like, yeah, they've closed for the day. But they said if you stamp this thing, then they'll get it first thing in the morning. Right?
Wow.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm a little nervous that
what
they
a
actually
hassle, James. Daggone it.
It's frustrating. But, yeah. So okay. So you got the LLC element to this, right?
Yes.
And I think what I found most interesting about what you were saying there is obviously you need to have a purpose behind it, right? Because when you're putting things in a trust, you're by definition giving up control of that asset. And what that means is you get benefits for giving up control.
Yes.
But you also have disadvantages from that. Can you outline those two things?
I think that's a good. Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I had something real quick on the series aspect. From a protection standpoint, that's just a Virginia law. So if someone sues you, and they don't live in the state, they have to sue you in the state. How does it when it goes across border? Because if not every state has a series protection, then could they actually go after all those other subsidiary?
It's interesting you said one of the unknown things about these are relatively new. Series LLCs are relatively new. There's not a lot of case law about them, and we don't know the answer to what happens if a non-series adopting state, a plaintiff in that state sues a Virginia series LLC. Can they kind of choose their own state as the forum and disregard the series? That's an open question.
So there isn't a precedent on
Isn't
it.
it?
There's no precedent on it yet.
I think it is if you sue a company, you have to sue someone in their state where they're headquartered. Is that the new thing?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's been a long time. Civil procedure is a class you take in first year law school, so that was 1995 for me. But in fairness, there has to be what's called personal jurisdiction over the defendant, right? I can't sue you if you only have operations as Fresh Move Media in Virginia. I can't sue you in a Nebraska court because you have no nexus to that Nebraska court,
Gotcha.
right? But if you were doing business in Nebraska, I could probably choose that forum and start the process there.
So, if you had rental properties then under a series, if someone's renting, then technically I guess you'd be fine then because they would be suing under Virginia law.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. And I do like the series LLC structure, but we have to have a client who's willing to accept the fact that they're relatively new and there's not a lot of precedent.
Yeah.
I mean, this was the case in limited liability companies in the early 90s when they came online. We didn't know if LLCs were going to be a thing, but now look at it. Everybody's an LLC now, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's filing for a C corporation status or an Inc. anymore. Everybody's an LLC.
Yep.
So it's going to gain momentum, I think.
That's interesting. So, okay, so circling back here, right? So you're giving up something to put it in an irrevocable trust,
Definitely.
right? Giving access to those assets away or some kind of limiting factor, which gives you benefits, right?
Yes.
So can you hash out the difference, right there?
Yeah, and just as kind of a foundational point, James, we're talking about an irrevocable trust.
Irrevocable trust.
Right, because the revocable trust you have complete control over. It's
Yeah.
just a probate avoidance play,
Yeah.
okay? The irrevocable trust, for some reason, you've decided to give up control over an asset, an investment, a piece of real estate, business, whatever, okay? Once you've given up control and you've basically passed that asset into a trust, you also have to nominate a new person or a bank or an entity as the so-called trustee. That's the person who's the legal owner of the trust assets with authority to act.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think a good way to explain this would be, you guys have heard of offshore trust in the Caymans,
Sure.
right? All that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Remember
Swedish
the movie
bank,
The Firm and
yeah.
all with Tom Cruise?
Swiss bank. I
Swiss,
guess.
yeah, Swiss banks, Caymans, all that
Yeah.
stuff, right? So quick history lesson on that. These so-called offshore asset protection trusts were very popular. I can't remember when. Let's just say it was in the early 80s or whatever, in the 80s, 90s, early 90s. The idea is you're going to take assets offshore and you're going to put them in an asset protection trust, and a bank in the Cayman Islands is going to be your trustee, subject to the Cayman Island laws. And you move a bunch of assets into that trust, and you no longer have them stateside, and you no longer have trustee authority over those assets. They're gone,
Yep.
as far as you're concerned.
Yeah.
You have a friendly trustee in the Caymans who's happy to write you checks as you request. You're a beneficiary of the trust. You're just like, hey, I'd like, give me $100,000 for my monthly stipend, whatever, right?
Yeah.
That trustee's happy to write you checks as long as they're getting their trustee fees, but they're the trustee. So you do something, you're a neurosurgeon and you clip a wrong neuron and you get sued, that Cayman Island trustee is going to lock that up and say, this door is closed, this money's not available to pay the creditor. This money, this door is now closed.
Okay.
And if you want access to this money, you're going to have to go through the Cayman law. And a plaintiff in New York City is going to be like, what do I do about this?
Yeah.
And so it's a very difficult way to attach those assets. So that's the kind of the most people understand an offshore trust and getting assets offshore, right? What happened was, I'd say probably about the last 10 or 15 years ago, Nevada, Alaska, and Delaware, they seem to be some of the more aggressive states to adopt legislation kind of early, kind of the tip of the spear on stuff like this. Nevada, Delaware, and Alaska said, there's a lot of money going offshore that we may be able to get some of this stuff if we open up our own domestic asset protection trust statutes.
Interesting. Okay.
Keep the money in the States.
Keep the money here.
Yep.
So Nevada came up. I can't remember who was first, Delaware or Nevada. But they basically said, you know what, we want some of this business. We're going to open these Nevada trust companies. We're going to serve as trustee, and we're going to basically do these self-settled domestic asset protection trusts. And if you get in trouble, we're going to lock the doors under our code. And Nevada legislature was all like, this sounds great. Let's get the tax revenue, right?
Yep.
So what ended up happening is those were the big three. Asset protection trust in those three states were starting to gain a lot of momentum, and people were no longer sending money offshore as much because it was safer to keep it stateside.
Yep.
And you had more ready access to it, right? Well, slowly but surely, other states have been coming online with their own domestic asset protection trust statutes. Virginia adopted one about 5 years ago, not nearly as progressive as Nevada. And just to give you a little bit of details, and don't quote me on this, I'd have to Google it to be sure, but think of it this way. I give away assets on a Tuesday afternoon. I'm not protected that next Wednesday because there's a seasoning requirement. I can't be queued and just put them in on a Tuesday and no longer have control over them, right?
Yep.
So we call it like a seasoning period where the assets have to sit in trust before they cure into an asset protection trust.
Okay.
I want to say Nevada might be 6 months. So you move the assets in, seasons for 6 months, and you're good.
Yeah, because you don't want somebody who's getting sued actively right now moving it in the next day, and then
that's called, we lawyers call that a fraudulent conveyance. You cannot transfer asset to hinder or delay a creditor. That's actually going to come back on you in bankruptcy. So that's a kind of technical point. But the point is, 6 months in Nevada. Virginia's 5 years. I mean, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So I kind of went off on that tangent, but the reason I wanted to do that is I'm giving up control of the asset so that it's protected from my creditors. That's the primary reason why someone would do an irrevocable trust. Mm-hmm. There are other tax reasons. There are other like governmental benefits reasons like Medicaid and VA aid and attendance benefits. There's a whole host of reasons why you would do an irrevocable trust. Mm-hmm. But the one I think most people can get their head wrapped around is asset protection. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I don't get sued and the trustee is going to lock the doors or close the bank vault.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you so I mean I have to imagine you get people in later stages in life doing that versus somebody who's younger, right?
Yeah.
Or does it really, I mean, is it all over the map age-wise?
You really do see some patterns. Usually it's the younger professionals with high-risk professions who are willing to do an asset protection trust.
I see. Okay.
And they've got at least $500,000 that they can, quote, do without, because if you're putting less than $500,000 in an asset protection trust, the cost of administration and tax filing is going to eat that up.
Yep.
So they usually are setting a floor of $500,000 and above for these trusts to be indicated.
Okay.
But it's usually those high-risk young professionals that are doing that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas pivot to the 70, 80-year-old who has a family farm that's been in the house, been in the family for generations, they're worried they're going to go on into a nursing home. Yep. And they're worried that the family's going to have to literally sell the farm to pay for their care. That client will put the family farm in an irrevocable trust for Medicaid purposes.
Okay, so they can draw Medicaid because it shows that they have a lower net worth or whatever it is.
Precisely. And that has a 5-year look-back rule or 5-year penalty period as well, right? So you can't have a 78-year-old client put the family farm in the Medicaid trust on Tuesday and apply for Medicaid on Wednesday.
Interesting.
You've got a 5-year period. You've got to season that trust for it to work right. But that's a strong play. We're doing lots of those trust
Yeah,
in-house.
so if somebody's 60 years old, right, it might make sense before they turn 65, put everything in that, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
and so you not only have you avoided probate, which is the, because it's not owned by you when you die anymore because it's in the trust,
Yep.
but you've also added the Medicaid asset. I mean, you're basically under the threshold for Medicaid qualification because you no longer technically own the house.
Yep.
And hopefully your kids love you, so you put the kids in charge as the trustee. They don't kick mom and dad out on the streets. They let mom and dad live there like they have forever.
Yeah.
And it works really well. So that trust would be indicated if mom and dad want to guarantee their kids are going to get a legacy no matter what happens to mom and dad. We're going to do a Medicaid asset protection trust for those folks.
Interesting.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
I got a question on the prenup aspect.
Yep.
I've seen discussions all the time where people say prenups don't work. They always fail, blah, 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 blah. It's because the person wrote the prenup on a napkin or whatever. But I saw a clip from a lawyer that said, if you do prenup well in advance of when you get married, you have a lawyer write up the prenup with, I guess, your terms and conditions. The other party, she has her own attorney review that document, and then they both sign off on it. That type of prenup is more likely to go in your favor versus if you do a prenup, 2 months before the wedding. She doesn't have an attorney, but she signs it because she's under duress or whatever, just signed it. Like, there's more excuses for them not to abide to that. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if you have an attorney and then she hires an attorney and they review it and they approve it, then that prenup is as strong as that contract, essentially. Correct?
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. I think all the elements you just outlined are exactly what I would advise a client. The only thing I would maybe, and it's not even adding to it, it would just be kind of underscoring something. In Virginia, prenups are not favored, but they're enforceable, right? So that means a court is going to strictly construe the terms of the agreement. They're going to be very careful at saying, this is what you agreed to, we're going to hold you to that. And we want to make sure you've got independent counsel for husband and wife or spouses, right? Separate spouses have a separate counsel. And there was enough time. You said like 2 months. Under Virginia law.
Like if you did it like 6 months before versus 2 months.
So that's a good point. The longer it's done in advance of the actual wedding, the more enforceable it tends to be. There is no code section that says it shall be 30 days, it shall be 60 days or more. But I do understand that the case laws, case law in Virginia in particular, they want to see the prenup done at least 30 days before the wedding, which is pretty tight. If I have a client calling me and they want to do it in 2 weeks, I'm going to say no, because it's, that sounds like it's under duress. It sounds like a shotgun prenup.
Yeah,
thing,
not gonna turn out well. That's like the How I Met Your Mother episode, right? About the prenup, and it's a stack this big,
yeah,
right? The week before the wedding.
Yeah, don't do that. And I have had clients come to me and say, I just want you to represent us both. The wife's okay with it. She's not, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to be a dual rep here, because I don't want to build you a prenup that's likely to get, take pot shots at this. So I won't work with a prenup client unless they agree that there will be other counsel for the spouse. So to everything you just outlined, all the elements you said about enforceability of prenups is right on.
Yeah, because I had a buddy of mine who got a divorce and he never got a prenup. Granted, when they got married, they were both dirt poor. Mm-hmm. This is Gonzalo I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He blew up in sales, and the company he was working for made a ton of money. Bought like 5 pieces of real estate, or 6 pieces of real estate, and they lived in one. He got in a divorce. He didn't have a prenup, and she got 2/3 of all the houses. He got to keep the more expensive ones, but I think it was just more of a value. She got more of like the lower cost and rentals, but she did nothing. She just worked from home. But if he would have got a prenup later, it wouldn't have mattered anyways, because all that was made when they got married, and he didn't have one. And that essentially in that aspect, his assets aren't protected.
So it's from the date of like when that's being made, right? So if the assets are already, the wealth has already been generated, right? Mm-hmm. You can't retroactively apply that.
Yeah, you can't do that. Once it's marital property, it's marital property.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that soccer player? That young soccer player who married that one 30-year-old lady, and he made millions of dollars, but they ended up getting a divorce, and she was thinking she was going to get half his income, but it come to realize that he put all his assets under his mom's name, and now she has to pay alimony to him.
Is that right?
Because
interesting.
this guy's made millions upon millions of dollars, but it's all under his mom's name.
Interesting.
Like the paycheck, like his mom gives him money whenever he needs stuff. He just does.
That's crazy.
That's a good asset protection strategy.
And people were calling this guy brilliant. What's also crazy because he got married to her when he was 18 and she's like 30.
Yeah.
So, but now she's like trying to supposedly cash in or whatever.
Yeah.
But the lawyer's like, there's nothing. This isn't like Spain or something, but like, there's nothing we can do because it's
well,
it's not
nothing
his.
here.
and I think I'm kind of like of the opinion that I think it's good that the conversation around prenups is changing a little bit, right? Especially for like business owners, right?
Mhm.
Because you think about what people don't realize is if a business has multiple partners, right, and then that partner dies, the spouse now becomes, if there's no prenup arrangement, becomes that partner.
And
right?
that could, like, well, for instance,
Yeah.
you guys are partners in this business.
Oh, I had a situation of literally just like that happen. So at my business Stratos, my buddy Gons was part owner. He owned almost half
There you
of
go.
that business.
Yeah.
And she knew about the business and all that stuff, and they were getting divorced. This was on the tail end of the business. We had some trouble at this point in time. They're getting divorced, and she started asking him about the assets of this business because technically she owns, I think it would have been 22% of that business because he owned 44%. And he just told her, he's like, yeah, it's doing crappy and it has no money. And she believed him. And then their lawyers or whatever didn't go after it. And we definitely had money.
Yeah.
But the problem is that now we would have to buy her out because now she has 22% votership rights and all that stuff. Granted, it didn't happen. She just called it as a loss. Whatever, I don't want it. Just went after his houses. But should a business, back to almost kind of what he is, should a business owner, you require, if we're both in business, we're both not married, but if he does decide to get married, because I did this with Cody, to prevent stuff like that, I think you're required to get a prenup to protect the business as itself.
And also how does a buy-sell agreement impact that too, right?
Sure.
Because I think there's some degree of protection there also. I'm not 100% sure on that, but
Yeah, I mean, you guys are asking the right questions. So, James, to your point,
yeah.
Instead of a prenup being the preferred document to deal with business interests in the event of a partner dying or becoming disabled, it's the buy-sell that I'm going to recommend, right?
Yeah.
The buy-sell has nothing to do with the spouse, frankly. It's an agreement among the business owners. It's an agreement among you guys as business owners.
Yeah.
And what you're going to stipulate is you're going to say if I go out of the business, either voluntarily or involuntarily, Ryan must buy my interest, right? We're going to try to we're going to restrict transfers of interest to work with people we want to work with.
Yeah.
So I oftentimes will see these buy-sell agreements to be what are called redemption agreements, meaning that if you go out of the business, Ryan must buy.
Yep.
So he's going to buy your interest, and he's going to pay off your estate. And your
And
estate
my
can,
spouse would, essentially get
Yes.
compensated for
yes, and you're going to hopefully have a disability policy in effect, or you're going to have a life insurance policy in effect, so he has the liquidity he needs to buy out your spouse. She is not going to be a party to this business. That's
Yeah.
what we want to do.
Yeah.
The prenup is really just the icing on the cake there that you can do your own stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to use a prenup and have my wife have to agree to what I'm doing at my business level. I'm going to do that with my business partners.
Yep.
And we're probably going to do a redemption or a so-called cross-purchase agreement where you're each getting life insurance policies on each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you're containing the risk within the business interest itself.
Yeah, I think that's how we're set up, right? In that case. So I just think it's interesting to me. I mean, there was recently, I think it was maybe the owner of the Dodgers or the owner of an LA team who they didn't have any kind of thing set up, right? And so he's getting divorced. He's a billionaire,
Oh my
right?
God.
And how do you not have on a massive $1 billion franchise?
Love.
It's just
It's
ridiculous.
just love. It was never going to go wrong.
It's
Nobody's going to
ridiculous.
die.
And he was probably 85 and she was probably 25,
Oh,
right?
dear.
And and it's like just I don't understand how an organization that size doesn't
Like
have
Al
basic
Pacino's
due
89
diligence.
is having a child.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I did. I saw that. I mean, James, to your point. I mean, and I may not don't quote me chapter and verse on this, but I think it's as high as 60% of folks don't have a written estate plan at all.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and think about it. Those people who are those high performers or business owners, they're running their business. They don't want to think about death and death planning. So on the one hand, you're shocked that someone with that much wealth and complexity wouldn't have a plan.
Yeah.
But it really doesn't strike me as that unusual because people just want to put that off. That's the ultimate thing we're going to procrastinate on is what happens when I die.
Yeah, they're like, I'm never gonna die.
I don't want to
right?
think about it.
Yeah.
Right?
The
So-
company Roku had all its money and assets in Silicon Valley Bank.
Oh yeah.
$400 million
Oof.
Yeah.
in one bank account, which is not FDIC insured.
Yeah.
It is now after what they did, but like your
Wow.
entire operating expenses for a multi-billion-dollar company is in one account.
Also, it's just in that instance too. It was wildly, what am I looking for? Unprofessional and or like stupid, right? To have that much liquidity.
Fire
just,
that CFO.
Just open, right?
Fire that
isn't-
CFO.
Like you don't need that much
Huh.
working capital at any given time, right? So
Right.
Invest in something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
that's
I didn't
wild.
know that. I didn't know that story. Wow.
400 million
Yeah.
in one account.
Yeah.
Mm-mm,
It's
no.
crazy.
Like imagine
Crazy.
opening your bank account. I got $400 million on my app.
Just there's not enough space for the zeros in
Yeah.
that.
Oh, I gotta
Wow.
turn my phone sideways so I can
It's
see
a
all the
portrait.
zeros.
That's exactly right.
So okay, so you got trusts. We talked a little about that. Estate plan and wills are all kind of
Well-
tied in with that, right?
Yeah,
I got a
absolutely.
question for someone who is married in the room.
Yep.
What can Aaron do to protect his assets?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. Well, keep in mind, married couples, to the extent they have marital assets, joint bank accounts, joint real estate, that kind of thing, it's marital property, right? So there is no way really to peel that out. I mean, once it's marital, and if something goes bad in the marriage, it's going to get caught up in what's called equitable distribution, which is the court's divvying up of what's happening between spouses, right? So keeping assets separate, as simple as keeping a separate bank account is fine. That separate assets tend not to make their way into a marital dispute. So as long as you keep clear records and separate assets, separate real estate, title ownership, and maintain it as separate, it's not usually going to get sucked up in a divorce proceeding. It's going to be separate. So it's as simple as that, really.
So, what determines where money falls in a divorce? Is what determines 50-50 or what determines the split? Like, that's always been a mystery to me. Like, you hear like some things going well or bad, and like what's the logic there?
Yeah, I mean, so family law and divorce law is not really my focus area, but I did take family law again, 1996. So, and I have lots of colleagues who practice in this area, and my this information will be a little bit dated because I am relying upon what I learned back in law school, but I don't think it's changed that much, Aaron. The idea behind this is the judges are guided by so-called statutory guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
This process is called equitable distribution. When a couple's getting divorced, the judge and the lawyers, they're going to look at all of the assets, okay? And as I recall from law school, there were literally 14 elements we're going to look at. The judge has to consider in order to divide the assets, and that doesn't have to be 50-50. It depends on does one spouse stay at home? Did one spouse give up his or her career to be a family, be at home? Earning potential.
So they would get more for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the judge is going to look at those 14. I remember 14 factors seems to be in my head, maybe from bar review. But the point is, the judge would commit reversible error if he or she doesn't check the boxes on all 14 criteria to consider all of these things and rendering a decree is what we call it, saying I've made my decision. I've considered the factors. Alimony shall be set at X. Child support shall be set at X, and this is my order.
So okay, I'm showing my ignorance here. What is the difference between alimony and child support?
Yeah, so alimony is going to be paid to your spouse, like income directly to your spouse, like an allowance. And child support is to take care of the kids. So those are different awards.
Oh wow.
Usually.
So how long does alimony last?
It's negotiated in the divorce decree. I mean, that's something that lawyers are going to negotiate.
So basically, like alimony is awarded based on basically you're taking care of them until
they get remarried, they die, they cohabitate with somebody for more than 6 months. You can build all those terms in the divorce decree. I've seen lifetime alimony or until you get remarried. I've seen crazy stuff.
But a prenup could prevent that.
Prenup's going to knock all that out of the water, right? The prenup is effectively a pre-negotiation of the equitable distribution award. You're doing that now.
Yeah.
And you're saying, hey, we're in the honeymoon period. We love each other. Here's what we're going to do. And you're basically pre-populating your divorce decree if it happens.
Yeah.
You don't have to go through the equitable distribution process at all. Because if you just leave it up to the courts, and we're a no fault, like Virginia's a so-called no fault divorce state, meaning that you don't have to prove grounds like you committed adultery, therefore I want a divorce. You can just say, I don't like your hair, and you could get divorced in Virginia, right?
Yeah.
So the point I'm making there
Which is not the case in every state.
Not
You
the
like
case in every
pineapple
state.
on your
Yeah.
pizza.
Yeah.
I want a
I'm
divorce.
out. I'm out, right? So no fault. But the point I'm making there is one of the 14 factors, as I recall, that the court's going to consider is, was there abandonment? Was there adultery, right? So the more kind of nasty the conduct was of one of the spouses, it could impact the award and could increase alimony. Child support is more of an objective standard. It's like the kids are this age, this is what we're going to provide. Alimony is more of the Wild West. I mean, whatever happened within the party dynamic is going to impact the alimony award, typically
Interesting.
speaking.
Yeah.
Was it like Dr. Dre? I remember reading.
So
this.
is alimony a percentage, or is alimony like like
A dollar figure.
Usually a dollar figure.
A dollar figure.
A
Okay.
dollar figure for it could be like straight.
So it's like an extra child.
I guess you could look
well,
at it that.
Dr.
which-
Dre has to pay $1 million a month in alimony.
Wow.
His, I remember reading, because it's California.
Yeah.
Uh,
So remember, alimony is basically a payment to your spouse. It's like a spousal allowance, right?
Oh wow.
Child support is purely for the kids.
Yeah.
So we do in Virginia, and I think most states, Aaron, we're going to divide those two awards on separate calculations, right? But alimony can go wild. I mean, it can be forever until you get remarried. It can be until the kids turn 18, 25, whatever.
so,
Wow.
highest alimony payment is Rupert and Anna Murdoch, $1.7 billion worth of his assets.
God.
110 of it million in cash.
Yeah.
So and alimony is separate from the divvying up of things.
That's true.
Wow, divorces seems like it's wildly expensive.
Oh, divorce is wild. That's something I've never really gone through. Fortunately, not gone through a divorce, nor do I represent clients in those. But you're right. It is wildly expensive, very complex. And what we're going to do with real estate, tangible personal property, those are all going to be dealt with in what's called a property settlement agreement.
You become an indentured servant.
For when you're divorcing?
Yeah,
Yes, you do.
that's what happens.
You do, unless you do a prenup, right?
Yeah.
Deal with that in advance. But to your point, though, I mean, what we're going to do is we're going to do a property settlement agreement between the spouses. Usually lawyers help you draft that. Sometimes they don't. But we're going to agree to divvy up the pots, the pans, the houses, the dogs, whatever. Property that you can see and touch, assets we're going to deal with in kind, that is houses and things. We're going to agree this is who gets what. Everything else is going to be alimony is going to be a payment, a cash payment on perhaps a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis of X dollars. That's negotiated, typically speaking.
But in his instance, at a bare minimum, since he has kids in the house, he should have a revocable trust and a will.
I
you
think
have
so.
At a minimum
for you.
revocable, right?
Yeah.
That
Well, I mean, to be fair to Aaron, so the will, the last will and testament, if you've got minor children who are under 18, you've got to have a will for guardianship. Heaven forbid something happens to mom and dad. It's the will that we need
we
for
have
the
that.
guardianship.
We have
you
that.
do?
Good.
Yeah.
So you have some life planned stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, actually, so this
See,
is
you
this
do-
is
you do
interesting.
a
I
lot
had
together.
someone I had someone approach me about making a death video. So basically, it was a video
for them. You were gonna
Oh,
record it for them.
In the
Yeah.
instance if they did die, this. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Yeah.
so it's a video that gets released that was to family. It was and it was a video that was going to be it never.
It's like what
actually
you
got
see
to
on
it.
TV all the time, right?
You
When-
see in
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Do-
like
do
the
people
murder
do that?
mystery.
Like,
It's like
I-
the murder mystery.
If you've seen
death
this video, I am
Yeah.
dead.
no, but it was more. It was also supposed to be given to their lawyer or something.
Yeah.
And so it was supposed to basically like.
And all the money that I have, all my possessions, go to the man who killed me.
So now
That would be a madness, right?
That would be madness.
You
for
wouldn't
sure.
want that.
so now with voice AI, I would have taken that video and changed their words to say that I'm the beneficiary. So
Totally could do that. I could
Yeah.
see that going down.
Yeah.
So yeah, video. There is no reading of the will like you see on TV. You know, I
Yeah.
don't read wills like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. The family congregates in my conference room. That doesn't really happen in real life.
Yeah.
At least not in Virginia.
Yeah.
But the video death. If you're seeing this video, I'm dead. You know, I've seen. I mean, I've never done one of those, but yeah, people will do that stuff. You know, it's kind of interesting.
That
And
is
your AI
interesting.
point, I hadn't thought about that. Man, that could be really wonky, right?
Eventually, that's going to creep into a court case. It will happen, and then I think
Mhm.
Yeah.
you won't be able to use video and voice to prove or accused of someone.
That's
because
a major, it's a major problem right
Totally
now,
agree.
especially on the audio element, because on the video element, it's there, it works, right? But on the audio element of this, like AI can absolutely listen to a few hours of dialogue and then
No,
immediately patch
doesn't
together.
need to be a few hours.
There you go.
It can literally
Minutes.
be 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow.
10 seconds.
10
It's getting
seconds
better
or
every day
less.
Yeah.
too. That's
As
getting
long
better
as
every
well,
day.
so long as the right syllables and consonants
like-
and vowels are
Like,
hit.
was it Mission
Yeah.
Impossible when he has the little voice changer thing here? He's like, say these words.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's where we
Um,
are. That's today.
that freaks. Yeah, it's happening so fast, and I am reading some of the, a lot of the folks that are in AI are really sounding the alarms and things. But you're right. I mean, you can't trust what you're hearing anymore. What's that going to do geopolitically and all that?
The founder of OpenAI is a doomsday prepper. Did you know that?
I maybe read that. That does ring a bell, but I didn't know that.
So
the
yeah,
details on that.
OpenAI, which is one of the largest, most used AI platforms now, which I think it's 65 million hits a day or something like that. It actually might be more than that. He's a doomsday prepper.
Oh
So
man.
that doesn't concern you.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. So it's crazy. I mean, but yeah, we're still doing wills like old school, like ink, wet ink on docs, visual witnessing. We can't even do e-signatures on wills or anything. So Virginia's a bit behind on
Could
this.
you go to ChatGPT and ask it, create me a will under Virginia state law for blah 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 under these? I'm curious to see if it would actually
I think it would do it.
do it. in
It
a-
probably would give you some boilerplate, right?
Yeah.
From reading a bunch of boilerplate wills that are out there.
I think it would.
I don't know that.
write me a prenup.
Now the question is, would that stand up in court, right? Or would you need a lawyer to sign off on that?
No,
right?
as long as the person signs the will,
Yeah.
right, and two witnesses observe the signing,
Yeah.
it's a legit will.
That would put a lot of trust in AI, though. Your entire fortunes in that. I don't think I would.
I have an AI attorney.
Yeah, you could do. It's funny when you remember the Series LLC talk we
Mhm.
had. I did a presentation on that about a month ago now to a small group of, like, they call it Next. It's like up and coming lawyers, CPAs, and financial advisors that meet. It's about 20 of them. And I asked ChatGPT I said, do a PowerPoint presentation on the Series LLC in Virginia, and it did a pretty darn good job. I actually ended up using a lot of it.
Yeah.
And it did a
Wow.
10-slide presentation. It was well done. I was like, this is actually about 80% plus accurate.
Wow.
Just like 5 seconds, and it generated it.
Yeah, I find AI to be a good place to like just get the wheels turning.
AI has creeped into these last 3 podcast episodes.
Yeah.
Every single one. Yeah. That's
Speak,
right.
s-
The
That's
real
a good point, though.
key to AI though is getting AI to train other AIs, and then so you can train your AIs to become your employees, and then like have them train more. You go 0 to 1,000 employees overnight.
So, speaking of
Wow.
tech, this just came out. I do want to talk about this because there are some aspects to this that I don't really relate to trust, but just from an AI standpoint and just tech-wise, I'm curious to get your opinion and your guys' thoughts on it. Aaron, if you could bring up YouTube and bring up the Apple Vision Pro. So this is Apple's way of coming into the it's augmented reality and virtual reality. Right now you have
This is
the-
the way into the second simulation.
yes, it's a simulation within a simulation.
Exactly.
Right?
Um,
If they're not
scroll down. Scroll
if
down.
they are not
go
introducing
to Apple's channel.
If
It's
they're
it's
not-
gonna be 9 minutes. Yeah, that one.
if they're not introducing Second Life to this, there's no point to
Second-
this.
So right
Are
now,
you a
like,
paper salesman in Second Life, right? Is what-
so the main thing, like with what is out there right now, like the MetaQuest, which we've done a podcast on,
Yep.
that is virtual reality. It's not augmented reality, was where you can still see everything, and then there's like and you can interact with something almost in real life, like you could.
So
and
like
with,
a hologram type.
like with
effect
this
instead of-
one demo I watched where they put their finger out and a digital butterfly landed on their finger. Yeah, obviously you don't get the taptic feedback. This is both VR and AR, so go ahead and play it. We're not gonna watch the whole thing. Just hit mute so we don't get copyright. And actually unmute it actually, because she does say some of the stuff actually. We'll play-
Introducing Apple Vision Pro. The era of spatial computing
and hit
is
pause.
here.
So is it? Wait a minute.
What?
So people are gonna walk around with this thing? Or
No,
is this
it's
like-
not designed for
okay,
that. But what's also crazy is you think that's glass, right? I mean, it is glass, but it's not see-through. So there's
It's projecting.
there's an LCD projecting.
Come
so
on.
it's-
Really?
Yes.
Stop it. Stop it.
Yes. And the reason is, it's when you like it. I can see why the idea is like you don't have to take your thing off to become immersive. Like someone's having a conversation. Like think if you're on an airplane and you're watching a movie and a stewardess comes by, you can just look over and then the display you're watching, they can almost see like the back reverse of what you're watching could go away, and then you can see it, so you can have that human interaction, then have that conversation and then go back into it.
Okay.
But I think that's kind of the whole design theory behind it. But no, that is not a see-through glass. That is an LCD. Sorry, that's a projection of your eyes, because those cameras literally looking at your eyes.
I hate everything.
It's got more pixels in that tiny thing on the inside than a 4K TV. So go ahead and hit play.
Hold on. One thing on this, right? I got such a bad headache wearing the damn Quest whatever thing, right? For however long. I played like a 5-minute game, right? I will have a real problem if this is what we're doing, like at home for entertainment in the foreseeable future.
I think it comes down to how the brightness and how that display works.
So you think there's some kind of setting mix that I could ultimately
I think
get that
these
would make
could be, again, Apple. Some people love Apple. Some people hate Apple.
Yep.
Apple, in my opinion, tends to make things better later. Like Samsung came out with something 2 years ago, and then Apple comes out with like, oh, Samsung came out with it. But it was broken half the time when Samsung did it. Yeah. When Apple does it, it usually works well. And it's usually seamless at first. But this is version 0. And like when the Apple Watch came out, the only apps available were Apple. When the iPhone came out, there was no App Store. It was only iPhone apps.
Yeah.
So like when you watch this whole demo, you only see Apple apps. You don't see any third party. Yeah. That'll become like version 1.0 and version 2.0.
Sure.
But it hit play. I could see some aspects of this, but like as part of this video, people are just walking around like they're doing laundry and watching like this. That makes no sense. But the idea is like, oh, you can replace your TV.
When you put on Apple Vision Pro, you see your world and everything in it.
So this would be considered augmented reality. That's
but
augmented reality. Virtual
space.
reality is what like more MetaQuest is.
So 100%, I want to play with
Apple's
this.
first ever spatial optical system.
$3,500.
Yeah.
It's familiar.
So I don't know yet if I want to invest
you
in one of
navigate
these
with your eyes.
with Fresh Foods Media money.
Simply tap to select.
Do a demo on it.
Flick to
James
scroll.
isn't thinking so either.
No. So
And
it's
use your
gonna happen.
voice
So
to dictate.
so eventually I can see that
It's
like
like magic.
making this technology better, and this is ultimately what
Apps
you
have
see in every
dimension.
sci-fi movie and all
React-
of that, right? Okay, great.
But
But they're talking about literal replacement for your TV. That's like that's a replacement for your TV.
The tech in this though, like the eye tracking, is also super impressive. Literally, where you're just looking at an app and it highlights, and that's what you want, and then you can interact it with just using your hand gestures. Versus with the MetaQuest, you have like the controllers, the hand
it's
thing.
like Minority Report stuff, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
She was talking about how it casts shadows for you in that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
That's pretty stupid.
yeah. So I see the version 1.0 being, honestly, we probably won't buy version 1.0. I could see buying version 2, where it's probably a tad bit cheaper. Anything that's new, proprietary, that comes out, it's always going to be super expensive. Like when Tesla first came out, the first Tesla Roadster was super expensive.
So Apple's designing a car.
Does it have windows?
But all
That's
virtual like this.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
just a display,
Yeah.
right, to show what's on it. Aaron, go ahead to the teamwork chat and pull up the meme I just sent, right? Because I think this is basically what we're talking about here, right?
As we talked about this, we have become Idiocracy.
Yes, we have become Idiocracy, right? Is what it is. You've seen Idiocracy, right? Oh my God, are you kidding me?
James, I mean, should you be surprised?
As someone
this is painful to me.
who's a videographer, and we talk about movies and all,
yeah.
he doesn't watch movies.
The Vision Pro, $34.99. So this is President Camacho Harris, who's the president in Idiocracy, and I just think it's perfect because that's basically what we have now. So
That is.
but you should see that movie. It's one of the few movies
hilarious.
that started as a theatrical scripted movie and has now become a documentary. Right?
Yeah.
So. Anyway, so
It's
the
a
Vision
toy.
Quest,
It's a toy for the rich
the
people
Vision-
right now. People
yeah.
who have money to splurge. It's
Yeah.
cool. I would wait for version 1 or 2.
6.
6 for
If it makes
Aaron
it.
to talk about that. So
So I want to talk briefly in the news segment here about golf, right? Because we've talked about golf a little bit on this podcast in various situations, but
Yeah, I love it.
this has actually a legal component to it, right? For those of you who are listening who don't know, at some point in the last, I guess it would have been last spring this time, Live Golf was formed, right? So a bunch of golfers that were on the PGA Tour, which is what we know of as professional golf.
Do you mean live golf? Kidding,
Yeah,
I'm just
live
kidding.
golf. A bunch of big names split off because Live Golf was backed by the Saudis, right? And it is like they have an entire fund that's just for like dumping
They have a lot of money.
billions into this, right? And so they were dropping tons of money in pulling away these big time talents. And I'm talking like $100 million sign-on bonuses just for joining Live Golf, and then these big events that had huge payoffs for just attending, right?
And they can wear shorts. When
And they
play.
can wear shorts, right?
deal.
Which, by the way, we all wear shorts on the golf course, right? But for professionals wearing shorts, it feels like amateurish, right?
Yes.
I watched it and I'm like, it just feels like guys on a
But,
Sunday
I
afternoon
mean,
playing golf.
you think about it, Michael Jordan now has one of the most prestigious golf courses in the world because his golf club didn't like him wearing shorts and they kicked him off of it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's fine. I think for personal like use and we're having fun. But these are professionals, right? There's like some decorum in golf, right? Golf is a gentleman's sport, right? So
Is
there's
there?
some decorum? So
Have you seen a Live Golf tournament?
no, I have.
There's
and,
no
and,
decorum.
well, that's what I mean, right? So it's like it's loud and it's raucous. It's different, right? It's a different feel. But they just did a 180 because the commissioner, and if you could pull up the ESPN article that we have on this happened this morning actually. The commissioner Jay Monahan was adamantly against Live Golf for the last year essentially, right? And penalizing players for leaving it, banning them from events, right? They were viscerally against it, right? And one of the things he was citing was the fact that it was like Saudi Arabia and we don't want their money and all this stuff, right? And then basically just did a 180 this morning and was like, nope, we're going to merge, right? So clearly there was a price tag there. And or maybe their legal teams were like, listen, you're in this protracted battle and you're going to be battling for years and you're going to be spending money for years to fight this battle. Maybe they basically said on paper it just makes sense to merge. But no, one of the PGA Tour players that wasn't named basically just said on Tuesday, no effing way, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was like nobody thought this had a chance of happening. Now, the exciting thing for fans of the sport overall is now you actually have these players that can now
Wear
move.
shorts.
Wear shorts.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
They can move between these tours now and actually be able to play in PGA events. My question will be, what's going to happen to all that money they got, right? So, like Phil Mickelson, who gets $100 million, or Dustin Johnson, who gets $100 million. I'm assuming they get to keep the money and still play in PGA events now, potentially. So, I don't know how that's all going to work. I guess it'll shake out.
So the ones who denied the money should have taken the money.
Yep.
Yeah, probably.
Should have taken the money.
Probably. And it's really crappy for guys like Rory and others that were like defending the PGA
They
Tour.
were totally circling the wagons on the PGA Tour. They were like, we've got to just, close ranks here, guys. I saw there was that Netflix documentary. I can't remember, First Shot or whatever.
Full Swing.
Full Swing was fantastic. There
Yeah.
was a little treatment of this dynamic in that.
Yeah. I actually highly recommend that.
That's
miniseries.
really
It's
solid.
good.
Wasn't
Yeah.
Tiger
Really
offered like $250 million?
He was offered a ton. They didn't really disclose how much, but
He didn't do it.
It was a lot. He didn't do it.
Should've
I mean,
done it.
for him, he's got so much money, it doesn't matter. And it's more about prestige for him, right? That it's like the tours where he's built his name, his reputation, to ruin it all at the end for $250 million or whatever.
But it would have
It's
been fine.
Yeah, apparently it would have been fine. But his reputation might have taken a hit, right? And for him, it's always been about his
People
reputation.
still like Tiger.
That's why when
Yeah.
everything blew up, a few years ago, that was like the biggest painful thing for him because he was about protecting his reputation.
Yeah.
When his wife bulldozed his house
Yeah.
that she won into the settlement.
Now, talk
She-
about a prenup,
She
right?
demoed
God.
the mansion,
With a
gone,
Yeah.
flattened it.
I always like the look Phil Mickelson and all in black. It reminds me of the old WWE characters and the villains. Like
Yeah.
he's got the dark sunglasses,
He's
the dark
embracing
hat.
it,
He's
right?
embraced. I kind of respect the guy for embracing that the kind of villain role. He was totally pulling that off.
Yeah.
And then playing good golf too.
Yeah.
So what are you gonna do?
Even in just the last few weeks, he's been in Twitter wars with all kinds of people from the PGA and spokespeople. So I guess it's all kumbaya now. They're
Now
all
everybody's
getting
getting.
along.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And James mentioned that before we are kind of on our prep here, and I didn't heard that news yet. So, that's
So
wild.
is Live Golf going to own part of the PGA?
So my understanding, and again, some of this still needs to be worked out, right? Like this is the first article that I've seen on it, but what's going to happen is there's going to be a for-profit parent company, right? That's going to own 3 different smaller organizations, right? That represent each of the
So
different.
who's getting the biggest
leagues,
part of
if
that
you will.
pie?
That's the question, right? So my assumption is whoever's bringing the money to the table has probably got more
We know.
ownership in that parent company.
We know who it is.
So it's probably the the private fund, right? That represents Saudi Arabia, right? So I don't know. I guess we'll see, right? How it's all going to shake out. But PGA Tour is going to stay its own entity, just owned by a larger company. DP World Tour is another one that's like a European, World Tour. And then you're going to have Live Golf. And they all have their own rules still. They all have their own thing. So potentially PGA Tour still have to wear pants, right? Versus Live Golf can wear shorts or whatever.
Burt Kreischer can come on the course, take his shirt off, and then
That's
drive
right.
you.
He did that recently.
And everyone just throws beer. Like,
Oh my god.
It's wild, man. It's like
Well,
Happy
that guy-
Gilmore over there.
the guy who got the
Live
hole in
Tour.
one at that one event, and then there's the whole crowd just went wild, and there's just like,
And there are a couple events in PGA that's the case, right? Waste Management Opens like that. It's like a stadium, and they throw beer and they do all that stuff. But Live, almost every event
It's
is
a party.
basically that.
It's a party.
That's
so,
wild news. I didn't,
So, well, Scott, we appreciate you coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, guys.
I think we can have you on because I think we can go a little bit more in depth into asset protection for business. I know we kind of segue into the divorce aspect.
I also want to pick your brain about the simulation, so I want to talk a little about
and
the
Matrix.
meditation. We talked about
Yeah.
that before we started as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, have me back anytime, guys. It was great. I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity.
thank you for tuning to the Think Fresh Move Forward podcast. We'll see you next week.